While this podcast will cover information about how to access therapy and other mental health services, it is not intended to be a substitute for said services. This podcast is intended for educational and entertainment purposes only. If you feel you are in need of mental health assistance, please seek out licensed professional care in your area.
Not that type of therapy podcast.
So hello, all of our wonderful listeners. Welcome to a special episode of Mental Health Quest. I'm making faces and Charlene is laughing at me. But that's okay because laughter is medicine, so I've heard.
Yes.
And it releases endorphins. And
it does.
We are having a very special episode today. For those of you who follow our social media accounts, you might have seen that I was at Los Angeles Comic-Con back in December. I had the amazing opportunity to be on 6 different panels. It was intense. I was going from just like room to room and just like nerding out left, right, and center.
Yeah, because Benjamin's popular.
Speaking of popular, I'm going to see Mean Girls, the musical tonight. So like,
nice.
Yeah. That's okay. You can sit with us. So we decided we will show for you a recording of one of the panels that I did, which was called Potatoes and Power. And you can guess what that's about. It's about cooking. No. It's about the psychology and mental health of Lord of the Rings. It was a really fun panel, and our audio editor, Kyle Rebar, shout out to Kyle Rebar, was video recording it for us, and so this is also a good chance for us to introduce our new audio editor, Kyle Rebar. Everyone give him a round of applause.
Yay!
So I hope you enjoy listening to this panel. There are other panels that we can show you that I've done, and I will actually be at WonderCon this weekend, March 24th through the 26th, here in beautiful Orange County, California. And I will be presenting on the panel about the Sandman, and also Our Flag Means Death.
Yay! Potatoes.
Potatoes. What do we do with potatoes?
Boil them, mash them, stick them in a stew.
There we go. Yes. That's actually how I started the panel. So you guys hear that.
Yeah. Have fun. Bye.
So hello, everybody. Are we ready to go on an adventure? Yay! So, potatoes. What do we do with them?
Boil them, mash them, stick them in the stew.
There we go. I'm glad you're in the right panel then. Just checking. That was a test you all passed. So, my name is Benjamin Taitz. I am a registered psychological associate. I work in clinical and forensic psychology, and I am the co-host of a podcast called Mental Health Quest, the Therapist's Office and Beyond, where we talk about what is mental health, what does it mean, how do you treat it, and what does it look like, and all sorts of cool things like that. I'm going to let all the panelists start to introduce themselves. We are missing one. He will join us in just a bit.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Isaac Taitz. Yes, there is a bit of a resemblance there. And I am a clinical psychologist for All Mind Health. It's a psychology practice for anxiety, depression, insomnia for geeks of all ages.
Oh, hi. I'm Justine Mastin. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist as well as a licensed alcohol and drug counselor. I do a whole bunch of other stuff. I call myself a psychotherapist and so much more. So tune in for what all of the so much more is. I'm best known as the captain and co-host of the Starship Therapise podcast and co-author of this book that you see right here. Ooh. And I think you can guess who this person is.
Yes. but in case you couldn't guess, my name is Larissa Garski. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I am Justine's taller half.
She's my spot.
That's right. We are platonic life partners. And in addition to practicing marriage and family therapy, I also co-host Starship Therapise, the podcast, and co-write and co-research with Justine on a variety of projects.
You did great.
I was going to say just in the nick of time.
That's
sir.
right. That was perfect timing. We could have kept vamping until Scott came back.
You're professionals. I appreciate it. I'm Dr. Scott Jordan, a.k.a. Zombie Scotty, cognitive psychologist, philosopher at Illinois State University. And I am absolutely thrilled to be here today to be able to make my case pro Boromir. So, we'll talk later.
He always has props.
But I love it every time, and I want to share that love every time.
You want to give props to him for having props.
Exactly.
Why is the Boromir doll smaller?
Oh, it's only going to get worse.
Only worse.
I'm only
It's
mad
gonna be
because I
very
didn't say it.
punishing. All right, well, so let us embark on our adventure. There are a couple of things that I personally really, really love about Lord of the Rings and the whole Tolkien universe. Hobbits are probably my favorite of them all because they're very different than any other kind of race in the Tolkienverse, and their kind of culture and their ethos is very, I think, very open and very pure. But I think hobbits, particularly 4 specific hobbits, can teach us something about family and what makes a family, particularly a found family. And I'm going to ask the Starship Therapists to take that.
Oh, you called us the Starship Therapists.
Yeah. So what can Frodo, Sam, Merry, and Pippin teach us about family?
We were talking about this over brunch, which was our second meal of the day. We had already had first breakfast while we were in bed. And we were talking about the whole fellowship. I mean, we love the hobbits, of course, but the whole fellowship is such a beautiful example of how we find our people, right? And we don't even necessarily know that we're missing something that we need until we meet that person and go, oh,
There you are.
There you are. And that's just what I needed. And we were also talking about when people come into our lives, we don't necessarily think about the time when they will eventually leave our lives. But that, people come into our lives for certain amounts of time and for certain purposes. And when they do leave, like when they get on the ship or,
Sure.
When they get taken by orcs, we think, oh, well, that's it. I guess that relationship wasn't important because it's over now. And how incredibly untrue that is. Would you share some stuff about Frodo and Sam?
Oh, okay. That wasn't where I thought you were going, but here we are nonetheless.
You know what? Share whatever you want.
It's an in crowd.
I'm the captain of the ship, but I know who really keeps us running.
Me and Kyle Rebar.
The videographer is also the producer of our podcast.
He is. We like to keep it all in the found family, if you will. Before I talk about Sam and Frodo, what I would want to say is I really love what you were saying about how family members, chosen family members, found family members can come into and out of our lives. And when they are out of our lives, whether because they're taken by orcs or they pass on onto the gray ships, the relationship does continue, right? Like there are ways that we can continue to honor. Oh, dang it, so early and I'm getting choked up.
She always cries.
It's true.
And not to make you feel unspecial, but just wanted you to know that
It's because you are special.
you don't
She
need to
cries.
be alarmed. That's what I was getting at.
But that when the person or the hobbit or the animal, right, is out of your life, there are still ways to love them, to care for them, to honor those memories, honor that relationship. And I think that's so beautifully shown with Merry and Pippin when they are separated from their hobbit brethren, that they still want to find ways to contribute. They still want to find ways to maintain that connection. And then, of course, Sam and Frodo are that canonical, beautiful representation of partnership. And whether you think of it as platonic or you see it as romantic, it's such a wonderful, beautiful encapsulation of the back and forth, the reciprocity, how we can lean in and ask for help from someone that we love. And then when we're feeling stronger again, they can lean on us.
Oh, and the last thing I want to say, and this is the beauty of collaboration, right? We realize things as other people are talking and we're engaging in conversation, which is why conventions are so cool. One of the many reasons. But thinking about where was I going? Do you remember?
Collaboration. We had just talked about Sam and Frodo and the beauty of their partnership.
Yes, that in American culture, we do not give respect to friendships.
Sure, not in mainstream culture. It's often not seen as this powerful, connective vibe that it is, but really so much of community, so much of family is based on these platonic ties of friendship and generosity and love and compassion.
Yeah, and that, community is how we get through all of the burdens that we pick up in our lives, whether they be the one ring or a bad email from your boss. It's community that gets us through it. And that's why are romantic relationships the center of life, or considered the center of life in mainstream American culture? Because someone decided that? That's social constructionism. Stay tuned for the Sandman panel at 2 o'clock when I'm going to talk all about that.
Well, so I have a question, continuing with the whole concept of family. We have the fellowship, as seen here. My question is, who's the dad and who's the crazy uncle?
Don't even say Boromir for crazy uncle. Don't even say
I think it's obviously Gandalf.
the crazy uncle.
Yeah,
Just making sure we got
obviously.
it.
Don't worry, Scott.
All right.
No, Boromir's got big brother energy.
He sure does.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
He's got eldest brother energy.
Parentified older brother.
Exactly.
He starts to crack under the pressure.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, well, so for me, Gandalf is a sage. And who do we find to be wisest in our families? It's often aunts and uncles because they're more mysterious.
Oh, I like that.
And so we respect them more than mom and dad because we know mom and dad so well and we've seen all of their, how they're fallible. But aunts and uncles, we haven't seen how fallible they are, or their fallibility is seen as like eccentricities. Like my nieces think I am so cool. I speak at Comic Cons. Yeah. I bring the best presents. But they don't see what a mess I am on the day-to-day.
No. And you know what? That's a fantastic analysis because what uncles and aunts provide is a simulation of adulthood, right? They provide a space for you to pretend what it's like to not be a crazy 4-year-old because your parents are the ones who deal with it. They're the ones that see it, and you're never going to be able to fool them. But so when you're working with your aunts and uncles, you get to pretend to be an adult. And I would argue that's what we continue to do, is continue to be civil. Except when we have our partners, they're the ones that see our stuff, right? And that's why we let them into our lives. And that's why we undervalue long-term commitment in this country, because we expect it to be about happiness.
Right.
We don't discuss the idea of trading maximum vulnerability for maximum exclusivity.
Put another way,
Right.
to quote Captain Kirk, we need our pain.
Well, this is very true, and I'm not giving mine up. So
No, that's right, it's yours.
it's my pain. I need it.
I love when you quote me back to me.
So what I'm hearing is family has a lot of different ways of being. There is, of course, our biological family that we are born into.
The family of origin.
The family of origin. There's the found family, but the dynamics between those can still be found in either or. So as we've seen, Boromir is the big brother, this guy right here. He's my Boromir. So, those dynamics, I think, is what's really important for our development, is we need to have somebody be that supportive, big brother, whether they are, biologically related to us or not. But we also need to have that kind of quirky aunt and uncle figure. We need to have the father figure, even if they are not biologically our father. We need to have the maternal sort, which I'm going to say is Sam. Sam is definitely the mother of the group. He's trying to, make sure that Frodo's eating and staying strong. Sam definitely has a lot of maternal energy there, and that's totally okay because he's very caring for his family, and that's what brothers do.
Larissa and I are both like,
So I'm going to take a stab.
we disagree.
I dig on Mary being thought of as a mother because
Because of his name?
No, the extended family's together. They're hanging out, and she's going to be open-minded and let things go to a point. But it's Mary who kind of squares Pippin away, does some things, takes care of the foolish Pippin. Not necessarily the mother for the whole group, but there's definitely a maternal vibe there.
Oh, I'm going with Aragorn as the mom.
Interesting. I would actually say that, I don't think there's a strong maternal presence in the Fellowship or the Lord of the Rings in many, many ways.
Because there are almost no women in the Tolkien verse.
Yes.
Oh, there is that.
And I would say, we don't need to, be bound by gender, right? There are plenty of people who, identify and present as men, but have strong maternal or goddess mother energy, right? But I don't think we see that so much in Lord of the Rings, and I think that makes sense when we think about Tolkien and his background and his studies. He was focused more
I'm going
on
to bring that back
the
later.
Christianness
That's a
of
great
it all,
point.
right? And so you do see glimpses of the mother and the goddess and that kind of energy, predominantly, I think, from Arwen, and I always pronounce her name wrong. Éowyn. I actually wasn't going to think of her, because I think she's far more...
Oh, you were thinking Galadriel?
Galadriel, yeah.
She's got the
That's
the
what I-
mother
That's
energy.
what I mean. That's what I mean, though. She does, but she's still there at the periphery, right? Peter Jackson brings them forward in the movies more, but in the books, they're very much in the background, which is very emblematic of Christian religion, right? And so I don't think we need to feel like we need to force mom into this group. I don't know that mom's
Mom
there.
was forced out of the group by the patriarchy being represented in the show, and we'll get back to that later.
Do you have something you wanted to add, Isaac?
Oh, I was just going to say, have we been confirmed that Gimli is indeed male? Because for dwarves, you never know. They got beards.
He uses he/him pronouns.
That's probably true.
Yeah.
All right.
That's true.
That answers that.
And that's canon.
So Gimli's my second favorite, except for the Hobbits. After the Hobbits is Gimli, because he just don't care, and I like that about him. So we mentioned Gandalf being the sage and could be the uncle figure or whatever who teaches us things. Gandalf teaches a lot about more than just the life that we see in front of us, but also an internal perspective. And so I'm wondering, Isaac, can you tell us a little bit about what Gandalf teaches us about the dreams and our internal world and our determination and all that stuff?
Yes, I can. I was actually going to use as a segue this concept of the uncle figure being distant, being somewhat removed, that we do not have them constantly in our lives all the time, just, engaging with us and for good and for ill. It's our aunts, our uncles, the kind of elder figures that do give us some guidance. They come in, they check in, they give you what information that you're seeking in the moment. They connect with you as the person that you are, as opposed to the child that they're used to seeing you, as parents tend to recall us as. And then they're out. And so you get to have a bit of that distance. So Gandalf is a very interesting character that I am fascinated by, particularly because he is very distant from a lot of the other ones. Technically speaking, as a Maiar, that's one of the kind of lesser angel figures from the series, he's basically more of a celestial being that comes into Middle-earth, and the archangels that he is underneath, the gods, the Valar that he works under, particularly if we go back, there's a family of them. Well, these are siblings. So we have the main ones that Gandalf was interacting with. The one on the bottom, his name is Irma. This is the god of dreams. And so this kind of mirrors a lot of Gandalf, or his OG name, Olorin. Anyone who cares. Basically, the aspirational nature that he has for the children of Iluvatar, the elves, the men, the hobbits, eventually when he meets them. So he has these aspirations for them. And it's not just, dreams as aspirations. He gives them visions. He kind of encourages them to become their better selves for those that listen. And so for those of us that do listen to our dreams, to our nocturnal visions as well as our aspirations, we can do great things, even if we're in small packages. But in addition, he spent a lot of time with, I believe her name is pronounced Nienna. This is the goddess of pity, of sorrow, of grief. This goddess would really look over the mortal races and be forlorn, for they were suffering. They did not have the full perspective that a deity tends to have. And so Gandalf tended to retain this information. And so he genuinely cared about the figures that he interacted with. If you notice from the stories, he tends to make a lot of mistakes. He tends to consider that Saruman, even after betrayal and even after essentially aligning with their darkest enemy, he gives him a chance. And in very traditional fashion, maybe where this whole double cross came from, the second chance was revoked, was not heeded. Even with Smeagol, he learned of Smeagol. He knew that he was hunting after the ring was a very major risk to our protagonist, and let it lie. Thought that they could handle it. So there is trust, there is hope, there is concern, and there's care and consideration, and these, I think, make for a fantastic family figure.
Big Cimmerillion energy over here.
Yeah. Gandalf was also more than willing to go to Theoden, tell him to wake up and get ready to go to war because this hasn't worked. Right? I mean, I love the vibe, and it's exactly how I want to be. And at the same time, another thing I love about Gandalf is that he doesn't just do war, he persuades others to do it. Because there's too much at risk. And in most mythologies that surround cultures, there's something in there about how do we protect ourselves from those things that would destroy us. So that I wouldn't even call it the dark side of Gandalf. I would just say the side that's willing to kill to protect what he values is a very important part of that character. Yeah.
Well, a gray area.
Yeah. Shadow, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he's doing the most fighting when he's white.
Exactly, but I like that Gandalf has that shift from the gray to the white, because obviously those colors have a lot of symbolism. But to go what Larissa just said about the shadow self, I feel like Gandalf really kind of acknowledges his shadow self. He understands his darker side, but he doesn't let the darker side take over. He's like, okay, well, if this is what my darker impulses are telling me, what do I need to do? And that's what gray is, at least to me, is gray is that combination of the light and the dark put together. And Gandalf teaches us that, you know what, sometimes there are things that we need to do for our own protection, for the protection of those that are important to us, that aren't going to be fun, are not going to be easy, and we might feel really bad about doing. But because our motivation, our aspiration is to protect those that are important to us, we can do it, and that gives us strength. But then we can also still go towards the white. We can still be white because we can still do good even past that one thing that we did wrong. That's what I like about Gandalf, at least.
As we're talking about this, I hadn't really conceptualized it this way, but I like the idea that Gandalf the Grey is Gandalf the gray area. Like Gandalf the both.
Yeah.
And not that white and black are good and evil, but that they are ends of a spectrum. And so he was in this space of ambiguity, and then he chose one or the other of the far ends to go on.
I would like to offer another interpretation.
Oh, do it.
And before I do it, I want to name this, that as all of us are talking today and you're listening to us, if any interpretation or way of looking at this hits you in a way where you're like, that's not my vibe. That doesn't fit with me. That doesn't fit with how I see those characters. That's beautiful. An aspect of the power of story is that it's offered to you, you take it, you experience it, and you make it your own in a way. You take the story and you change it because of who you are and how you move in the world. So we're just offering interpretations and ways to look at things. By no means are we up here being like, this is the way and the only way to see any of these characters.
That's a whole different franchise.
We wrote
This is the way, it's a whole different franchise. We had that panel yesterday.
We wrote a book about fan fiction. We think you should be able to do whatever you want with someone else's story.
So I want to keep going on this Gandalf the White thing. I totally love the idea of gray as ambiguity. And Gandalf goes white when he knows he has to kill.
That's when he picks it.
We don't like to talk about it that way, but he says, no, I'm going to protect this. And it's interesting that for us, for certain cultures, white is a color of purity and virtue. Yet what he's accomplishing in that change is the power to do what it takes to keep what he values going. So there's not a white in it. Actually, the color white, if we want to, is actually all wavelengths.
It's the absence.
Well, black,
No.
black
Black
is
is
the
the
absence.
absence. White is all
everything.
colors.
So, Gandalf's all in when he's white,
Yeah.
and he's all in for protecting what he values, not what Sauron values.
I want to add that, like, another way to look at this is from a standpoint of integration, that when we feel internal conflict, we don't know which way to go, we're sitting in ambiguity, we're sitting in the gray of, like, what do different aspects of my consciousness want? What do different aspects of my unconsciousness want? And when we integrate, we're bringing more of those pieces together, and we're saying, how am I choosing, how am I working in harmony and alignment? I think you're right, Scott, that when Gandalf moves forward and decides, all right, here's all of me, and I'm putting it into alignment, he chooses, and he chooses violence.
Yeah.
Going from this aspect of when does he become Gandalf the White, it's after he literally fights
The Balrog.
his demon.
Yeah.
So going from the Silmarillion, his whole concept was, I don't want to go to Middle-earth. I'm scared. I can't face the greatest evil. And his higher-up said, no, that's why you're going. You're going to learn how to face your fear. And if anyone here has dealt with anxiety, one of the greatest ways to deal with anxiety is to sit with it and to feel it out and feel it out and feel it out until it is gone. Because we can't stay anxious forever. Gandalf can't stay afraid forever. Even this, amazing wizard, you think you couldn't be afraid of anything, but he faces this ridiculous beast, technically on par with him. They fight for days and days and days. He is out of energy. And when you are completely done with your anxiety, when you're completely done with your fear, then you get this elevation. And then you can activate or kind of elevate to a higher spectrum, if you want to think of it in terms of color.
He smote him upon the mountaintop.
Yes. So
I love that line.
well, Gandalf wasn't the only one who, faced fears and, anxieties about his role and his mission. That takes us back to the brothers of Boromir and Aragorn. So, Dr. Scott Jordan.
So here we are at White City. Oh, I'm sorry. Here we are at Minas Tirith. So I love what Peter Jackson did for Boromir because he prevented Tolkien. He created an alternative to what Tolkien did to Boromir, and I'll explain as I go. So I bought action figures of Boromir and Aragorn, and I have them here today. You can see the Boromir. It came in a broken package. The thing's ripped. No. Boromir is smaller than Aragorn, right? It's all clear, embodied in the fact that our culture values Aragorn over Boromir. And if we could go to the next slide, please, and if you could play the clip, the sound should be there.
Minas Tirith is the safer road. You know that. From there we can regroup. Strike out for Mordor from a place of strength.
There is no strength in Gondor that can avail us.
That's me.
You were quick enough to trust the elves.
Yeah.
Have you so little faith in your own people? Yes, there is weakness, there is frailty, but there is courage also, and honor to be found in men. But you will not see that. You are afraid. All your life, you have hidden in the shadows, scared of who you are, of what you are.
I will not lead the ring within 100 leagues of your city.
Damn, aren't you supposed to be the king? I mean, this is what Peter Jackson did for Boromir that the book didn't. Peter Jackson pointed out, if we're going to do this genetic determinism stuff, and you get to be king because of your genes, why aren't you doing your job? Why am I doing this job? And then Aragorn is saying all this mean, petty crap, like, I'm not going to leave. It's not supposed to be Boromir's city. It's supposed to be Aragorn's city. Now, like, it's clear. I love this story. I wanted to be Aragorn. And as I grew older, I thought that Boromir was getting a bit dissed. So if we could go to the next slide here. Who is Boromir? Oh, I'll skip this, but someone came out and read it and said, I'm so glad when Boromir dies, all he did was whine.
So it says when Boromir tries to take the ring, it isn't because he's greedy or corrupted. It's because he doesn't want to leave his people to die. He wants to know that he spent all those years fighting for a reason. And when Frodo refuses him and runs away, that's when Boromir finally realizes that he has become the man he hates the most, his father.
So who is Boromir? Was the son of a steward? It shouldn't be Seward. It should be Steward.
Steward, typo, everyone, typo.
He's a war veteran. He's defended Middle-earth and Gondor against the hordes of Sauron for years and seen countless numbers of colleagues die. Now, should Boromir be engaging in violence? Well, the answer is, of course, yes, if they're going to continue. Just like Gandalf goes white and says, yeah, let's do violence now. If we're buying into genetic determinism as a means of granting ruler power, it wasn't protecting the realm, really Aragorn's journey. When I look at why Boromir was written by Tolkien, why Sam and Frodo shared their relationship, why Minas Tirith is white, I see a perpetuation of the British monarchy. Right? I see this story as a beautiful story about friendship wrapped in a beautiful tribute to monarchy. And we got to get our king to come home. It's Arthur all over, right? Arthur pulls a sword out of the stone. Aragorn has a sword remade. And doing this to saying these things about Boromir, I'll just leave it at that. I think Tolkien didn't realize he was after perpetuating monarchy with these beautiful stories about the people he knew. And I think Jackson kind of disrupted that a bit by Boromir calling him out. That's only in the extended version, by the way. Calling him out and basically calling him a coward. And I just love that happened. So I'm pro Boromir. Let's just leave it at that.
Well, it seemed like Tolkien had a real lack of awareness.
Yeah.
Well, I would actually push against that, but...
Here we go.
Okay.
Go ahead.
We're letting the people into our process. This is what writing a book together looks like. It's like, I'm going to challenge that, but go ahead. Well, because he kept saying, this isn't an allegory. I'm not trying to say anything.
Right.
Except like the whole thing is about World War I.
Right.
Well, right, but I don't know that I don't know that we can totally trust, or I don't know that we can take what he said there to be his.
Do you think he was lying?
I think maybe a part of him felt that, but clearly there were other parts at play. And I think one of the beautiful things, especially about the books, is that there is so much narrative contradiction and complication, right? So, like, absolutely, I think you're talking about, Scott, is there. I think also, though, there is throughout the books this real sadness that is written in whenever the time of men is discussed.
Yeah.
And so, I do think that speaks to, like, a real ambivalence about the idea of the return of the king, the idea, like real sadness about humanity taking over. So much of what is written about with love and care are the non-human species in the book.
So on one hand, it could be a critique of colonialism,
Oh,
right?
You know who the real enemy here is? Modernity.
Well,
I thought it was unimpeded darkness and greed and, all that stuff that the Nazgul kind of personified.
Which is, you could say, a metaphor for modernity, a metaphor for this way of life where we're leaning into exploitation of resources. We're leaning into this more mechanized way of living and being and treating the earth.
Saruman was
And the
cursed
ants.
for ruining the forest and going toward tech. I mean, that's very much a part of the story. The only thing I'll say is when Gandalf goes white, it's just high praise for the British monarchy. It's time for us to be, because the white's there for a reason. It's to morally justify the violence.
Right.
Now, I'm not saying the violence shouldn't happen, folks. I'm being descriptive here. I'm just saying that people that are perpetrating people that are engaged in these kind of things, when you're hurting people, even if you're hurting them because they've attacked you, if you're hurting people, you feel it. And the only way you prevent yourself from feeling it is by creating some cognitive Wanda bubble that keeps turns it into virtue.
And justice.
Justice. So I call it the dissonance to virtue contrivance, which you don't even do consciously. Well, he was a jerk anyway, right? You just say these things quickly that resolve your dissonance, as you said. You go from gray to white usually because you feel better about yourself because you acted violently, and and that causes them pain, and that causes you pain.
So you're trying to say that he was blinded by his whiteness.
Blinded by his white light, wrapped up.
Exactly.
I won't do the rest.
Thanks. So the concept of this panel, the title of this panel, in addition to being about potatoes, was also about power. And the ring itself is that of power. Spoilers for the show that's going to be coming up soon, or the next season. Fingers crossed. Nonetheless, Gandalf, for the most part, avoided this ring. He stated that the only beings that were best suited to carry this ring, to be in charge of this, were the hobbits, because they did not seek power. Even when Boromir tried to get the ring, because as many big brothers do, they're like, I know what to do, just let me beat the boss.
Yeah.
And it's not their game.
Right.
That's not their role. Sometimes the role of the friend, of the elder sibling, of the parent, etc., is to just make sure that the individual can get to their next goal, to get to move along, to carry their own load. But like Sam says, you can carry that person along. So everybody's going to have their burdens, and you're the best one suited for it. And I know that's a really roundabout and crappy way of saying it when you're going through some really hard stuff. But if you are having a hard time, you find yourself your Boromir, you find yourself your Gandalf, you find yourself maybe Sam. Sam, there we go. Yeah, exactly. But if, their feet are, regular human-sized and they're not exactly hobbitish, a therapist is a nice, half step.
Well, I would like to piggyback off of that. I think, yes, find a support, find supports that you trust, find community, find friends, but also find yourself. Find the still, quiet center within you that is the seat of such knowing, such love, such compassion. You need not put everything out into others. You need not, seek your purpose in another person. You can find that within yourself.
So you can support yourself. You don't need a sidekick. A sidekick helps, though.
Right. I mean, to quote Toni Morrison, which I was not anticipating quoting Toni Morrison, I'm a Lord of the Rings panel, right? But she said this so beautifully in Beloved, you are your own best thing. Cherish yourself.
I would just add to that is find others who love your vulnerability and protect it. Because it's if you keep your vulnerability to yourself, if you keep your weakness to yourself, then you have no reference. The people that we call our best friends are the people that will hear all of our weakness and stick around. And that matters because when two brains interact in a conversation, the words almost don't matter. What matters is the stabilization of the high frequency noise going on in each brain. You watch people talk, and they're basically lulling each other into a state of non-noise. So do find that person that you can be vulnerable with, and then protect that. And don't act like you got to do that with everybody, right? Not everybody can be your best friend, because maximum exclusivity entails a maximum vulnerability.
Yeah, and it's so lovely to hear this because I also think of, we do not have a unitary mind, each of us. We contain multiverses, and within each of us are different aspects of ourselves that are interacting with each other in the way we interact with people out here.
Yes.
And so, Larissa talking about the self, there's all these parts too that need our attention. So we almost have our own internal fellowship. We've got our own Gandalf with an idea, and we've got our Sam who's supporting us, and we've got our Legolas that's like, I bet I could skateboard down those stairs.
But we can't. But
We really want to.
And that's the Gimli.
not the beers.
So I want to make sure we have time for questions and or comments from the audience. We have about 10 minutes. So if anyone has anything they'd like to ask or just state because they enjoyed it, please go ahead.
Yeah, there was a lot of talk about Gandalf, and I wanted to just propose a framework to maybe analyze, actually sort of two frameworks. One is potentially an amorality interpretation, so the amoral approach of more observer, hands off sort of deal, or just an actor in the world without making judgment. And then, his transition to a moral, righteous character. And the other one is that of the martyr. So basically his role as a martyr within the fellowship. And I think they talk about it in the story, but pretty much I think that's a turning point where the death of the fellowship initially occurs.
I'll speak to the first part. You actually make a very astute observation. One of the other names of Gandalf, and everyone's got 5 billion names, translates to the traveler. I think Mithrandir from the elves, and that's what he was. He wandered around. He was exploring. He never set down roots like Saruman did, or any of the other wizards. Really, he essentially was constantly moving and visiting everybody and engaging with everybody to experience how do they live, to find the joys of their lives, to bring that to them, but also to keep moving and to carry that on to everyone else. Similarly, if we are fearful, then we're going to be constantly avoidant. We're not going to be sticking our roots down anywhere that we may have trouble come find us. And not that Gandalf was essentially like running away, but that's a very obvious illustration when he finally decides to stand for something and even let himself fall. Then he clears himself of that fear. He clears himself of that wishy-washiness, for lack of a better word. And so he gets to be kind of clear-minded, clear-focused. He's sent back, essentially. His spirit wandered out, and he's basically sent back to finish his purpose. And if we are to look at this as an example of mindfulness, when we choose what we want to do, when we decide to be single-minded in one particular pursuit, then we have a bit of a boost. We get to feel a little bit more, I guess, enlightened to some degree.
Religion from the phenomenologists?
Oh, well, Gandalf's rebirth, right? I remember reading the Balrog scene, sitting at a Jellystone Park. I remember those are places where people had gravel, where you'd park your trailer, and my dad was in a golf club or whatever. I'm sitting there in a lawn chair at this gravel place reading this battle, and these are the kinds of ideas, the kinds of people I wanted to meet, the kind of drama I wanted to have in my life. And my dad says, so what do you think of the place? I was such a jerk. I said, well, Dad, there could be more trees, man. So I was, and he got so mad. Poor guy, he was trying so hard. But I was in a different place already, right? And Gandalf's sacrifice meant everything to me when I was, this idea of being that committed to something, and being that so much other-oriented, right? The rebirth of Gandalf, I'm going to admit it's just not, for me, one of the really interesting things of the story. I'm sorry, but we can take the Ring of Power and we can throw it around. We started with power, but the thing is, things need to get done, and they need to get done now, right? And okay, so some people are going to look better than others because they don't want to use the ring, but what's really coming down is, where the hell is Rohan? Where is everybody, right? And so the whole mythology of the ring and power is part of it. But for me, it's, okay, we got to get something done now, or our existence as we know it is at stake. So the rebirth, for me, that's, I got to go be me now, and that makes me righteous, and that's what that's all about. But in the end, he's catching up with other people at that point.
So an argument could be made that most epic series would be a lot different characters just went to therapy. Who in Lord of the Rings would you most want to therapize?
Good question. I'm gonna jump in here and give voice to. I was just on a podcast called Popcorn Psychology by a couple of folks out of Chicago, and we talked all about this. So if you want to hear 2 hours of
answers,
but my answer was I wanted to work with Merry and Pippin, and we were specifically talking about the Two Towers, because Merry and Pippin had just gone through realizing that the Shire is in danger. And this is very similar to what a lot of my clients deal with, which is they're looking around at the world and realizing that she's very sick. And also, once you have that realization, you realize that your own life is finite. And then you start questioning, what is the meaning of your life? And my suspicion is that once Merry and Pippin smoke all that South Farling weed
without inviting me
and come down again, they're like, oh Oh.
Dude.
Where's my car?
What does it all mean?
I'm going to quickly jump to say I would the character I would love to have coffee with or maybe a beer with would be Galadriel. Because I say, because we would already know each other, right? And we would be able to talk. And I say, baby, you got this. You're Gaia. Do it, right? In other words, because the story is patriarchal, because the story is there to perpetuate a patriarchal monarchy, they tell the story of Gaia, and it's Galadriel. Now, for those who don't know, Gaia is an indigenous ontology worldview that recognizes women can give life and take it. And all men can do is take it, right? Men can't give life. So there are many worldviews driven around, this idea of femininity, and Kill Bill 2 is all about, Trixie learning that she's Gaia. And the fact that they had Galadriel play with a little power, and then feel like, okay, because, I survived. No, baby, you are the power, right? And so I just find it interesting that Gaia moment did happen, and it would just let go, right? Because, she's leaving anyway, right? I mean, and I think that's coming out of Tolkien, right? Absolutely. So we would have a good time, by the way. We would have a great conversation.
I'm going to do a short answer, though. I would either want to do couples therapy with Sam and Frodo, because I think they'd be a delight. Right? It would be so cool. And then Boromir, just to really be with him in his profound parentification, right? Like, he was asked to do the role of the king, but he was never given that true responsibility, never really empowered in that way. And it caused him to so doubt himself. Yep. And so internalize all this shame and blame. And it would be wonderful to help him release that and come into his own and figure out, what is my destiny?
Even shorter answer, I'd want to help Sauron get some shut-eye. So some CBT for insomnia. It's my specialty. Just, close that eye.
So before we go to the last question, I would actually like to do therapy with Gollum/Smeagol. There seems to be a lot of trauma/addiction issues there, and even some criminal thinking. And so I just would love to kind of dig into that a little bit more. So last question.
We talk about that a lot on that podcast.
Yeah, so check out the podcast. Last question, please.
Regarding when you mentioned Tolkien's famous quote about hating the word allegory, do you believe that, speculate whether Tolkien was not being fully aware of himself, but do you think he actually was being fully aware of himself when he said that he knew that he had his own biases, even if he didn't know what those were, and he didn't want anyone to read Lord of the Rings as that one thing?
Yeah.
He'd be okay with fans like this.
Oh, I think he absolutely would, right? I don't remember.
I wish he could be here.
Right? But there's that thing where he hoped that Lord of the Rings would be this launching point for new stories and new fantasy. And mainstream pop culture just kind of redoes it every couple of years. And I think there's beauty in that too. But I think you're absolutely right that he didn't want his stories to be the beginning and the end. He wanted them to be the beginning. I love that. I love that interpretation. Thank you.
Yeah, I also think that if you look at the map of Middle Earth, right, where the hobbits come from is up in the northwest, right? And where the evil is down in the southeast.
Problematic.
And Tolkien's fortunate if we interpret this as an allegory, because we sympathize with the idea of not the German culture, which tend to be held responsible for the beginning of the two world wars. If you're going to call them black, ugly, evil orcs, that makes sense. But if you start talking about black skin as evil, then you're doing something different. So I think his work benefits by actually him drawing a map of where we were. It's pretty obvious. And then having us interpret the blackness of the evil as a spiritual thing, not a race thing.
Similarly, though he may have tried to shy away from the allegories initially, during World War II, when Germany was trying to invite him in, but because they were so adamant, they needed him to promise that you're not Jewish, right? And he didn't want none of that. And so he said, I don't have the honor of being that population. And he didn't bother going to Germany. And then later on, he would eventually write about how the dwarves, though they've been kind of allegorized to the Jewish people, there is the honorable aspects that he points out. Yes, there's a large family value. They're very strong people. They value their culture. And for each of these groups, he would point to the positives. And so he would look to and try to find that brightest part of each culture.
Well, as we end this panel, let's just go down and let everyone know where they can find you on the interwebs, starting with Scott.
Oh, well, first of all, thanks for this panel, guys. This was awesome. And thanks for letting me go on a tirade about Boromir. So you can find me on YouTube. Just type in Dark Loops Productions, and this is the kind of thing we do. They're turned into podcasts now, which you can find. Just look for Dark Loops Productions. And thanks again for the opportunity.
Yeah, thanks so much for the opportunity. It was great to be here with all of you and talk about this fabulous series of stories. I'm Larissa Garski, and you can't really find me too much on the internet. But if you really want to find me, you'll find me at our podcast, Starship Therapise, which is a podcast and also a website and an Instagram. And I never remember where the underscore is, but if you search Starship Therapise, you'll find it. Instagram will help get you there.
Again, I'm Justine Mastin. Starship Therapise, Using Therapeutic Fanfiction to Rewrite Your Life, is available wherever fine and pretty good books are sold, and we also have a handful of copies up here if you are interested. I'm on a panel right after this. We're talking about the Sandman. So if you enjoyed, like literally right here.
Just stay in your seats.
Just stay here.
Same
just
room,
stay here.
stay in your seats.
At
least like 4 of us are going to be on that
Yeah, if you were
panel,
like, I didn't hear that blonde lady say enough stuff. I want more. Stick around. People are literally leaving. They're like, no, I've had
I'm on, man.
We also have a new book coming out if you yourself are someone in the helping industry. It's called The Grieving Therapist, Caring for Yourself and Your Clients When It Feels Like the End of the World, which is all about how hard it is to be a therapist in the world in which we currently live. And that's available for pre-sale. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Mind Body Fandom, because I take a holistic approach to healing mind, body, and fandom.
Hi, everyone. I've been Dr. Isaac Taitz, and you can find me online at All Mind Health, ALLMINDHEALTH, as it says right over there. And you can also come up and grab a card or two if you'd like. And I'll be hosting the Sandman panel right after this.
And I am Benjamin Taitz. You can find me on Facebook and Twitter at my podcast, MHQ Podcast, Mental Health Quest. You can listen to it wherever podcasts are found. And I will be on the next panel also. So stick around, please do.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.